We're going to look at the trade relationship between the U.S. We welcome Barber, president of the Denver-Hainan Corporation, joining us live from Denver. Thank you very much for joining us. You know, so here we are. The two are in Southern California. It's sunny, it's hot. The background is very nice, but there are some very serious economic issues to discuss. This is a meeting of economic giants. What do you expect to hear from both sides? Let's start with China.
With China, I believe that the Chinese are really serious about developing stronger relationships with the United States. This has been the objective since 1978. So I believe that the Chinese and the companies you've mentioned, SAIC, Wangshan, Sany, they all have good opportunities in the U.S., and they also create a lot of opportunities for U.S. companies in China.
Now, what about on the United States sides? What is the likely area of topics that they're going to focus on?
I think that on the U.S. side, they're going to be talking more about cybersecurity, probably a few more social issues rather than economic issues. And I think that's a big difference between U.S. and China, is that China's far more focused on economic issues and the U.S. is focused on more social issues.
You're probably following this, but the United States Senate and Congress are still talking about this foreign exchange currency situation. And whenever we have a delegation that visits, whether it's Shanghai or Beijing or anywhere in China, this topic comes up very often. They're in California. Do you think they will talk about the foreign exchange issue, or will it be avoided?
I'm certain they'll talk about it, although if you look at the numbers, I believe the yuan has appreciated about 11% recently, so that gap is becoming much smaller, and the yuan is continuing to appreciate, so it's become less of a problem.
Alan, the president today had a fairly big jobs report. The economy very much is an issue, not just in the United States, but also in China as well, and I'm sure they'll discuss some of the global issues. What do you think Obama will focus on?
I think he will focus on one thing they should focus on that they have not is the solar issue, and we're familiar with what happened there. I think they'll focus on more market entry into the Chinese markets, trying to get the U.S. companies easier access to China, which is somewhat of a misnomer because I know from my experience a lot of Chinese companies welcome U.S. companies to China.
You know, Yakenda brings up a very good point. Obviously, the United States welcomes investments and tourists from around the world, especially from China. But the elephant in the room, potentially for the meeting between Obama and Xi, is going to be the most recent deal, which is the Smithfields deal. I just want to get your thoughts on if you think there's going to be any regulatory issues with that deal.
Hopefully there will not be regulatory issues with that deal. And everybody's talking about Smithfield and Shuanghui. What they're not discussing is there are about 20 states that are huge hog producers in the United States needing new markets. So the Smithfield, Shuanghui acquiring Smithfield could be a huge market opener for those states, and most of those states are in the Midwest, which are very unfamiliar to the Chinese. The Chinese primarily are familiar with California, New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C. They're not as familiar with the interior of the United States, so this would be a good way to get greater cooperation between China and the Midwest of the United States, and it'll benefit everyone.
Alan, you've got a very unique background in that you've consulted with companies both here in the United States and also in China as well. And my last question to you is, you know, the states, the individual states, they of course welcome the Chinese investment by far because they want the jobs and investments in the states. But at the same time, the federal government often takes a slightly different approach. I think you know where I'm going with this. Does that confuse sometimes Chinese executives?
It confuses Chinese executives tremendously. I'll give you two quick examples. One is China Aviation acquired Cirrus Aircraft in Duluth, Minnesota, saved about 1,000 jobs. The member of the House at that time wanted to instigate a CFIUS review. The mayor of Duluth argued strongly that they do nothing on this. He did not. The deal is there. They saved 1,000 jobs. Cirrus is now developing a new aircraft, which they would not have been able to do without the Chinese investment. So that's an example. But the other part of that example is that the Chinese need to work closely with local officials in the United States, more so than the federal, because all economic development is local.
All right.
And we need to figure out how to do that.
Alan, I apologize, we're going to have to leave it there, but I do want to thank you for your insights on this.
Well,
Alan
thank
Barber
you.
joining us from Denver, from the Denver-Hainan Corporation.